And to open, we'd like to begin with brief remarks from USAID Administrator Raj Shah.
I wanted to steal just a few minutes here to explain to those of you gathered here and also those watching on the live stream why this particular panel is so important. When the President had asked us to ensure that we use this year's G8 to continue and accelerate leadership on agriculture and nutrition for the purpose of addressing hunger and poverty, we turned to the Grow Africa Partnership to help make today possible. And it has been, in fact, a partnership. Grow Africa is a platform that has grown out of a relationship between the World Economic Forum and African business leaders, heads of state, international institutions, and the United States, the United Kingdom, and a number of other partners. And last week, Grow Africa had what I would think of as a seminal moment. It was convened in Addis Ababa, and it was in fact oversubscribed and very, very clear in the words of, in that setting, President Kagame, who described in articulate terms why Grow Africa was both an African-owned platform and why it was so important to the future of this kind of partnership. And in creating Grow Africa, the partners that have come together to do it have really created a platform that will take the energy and enthusiasm of today forward. And so I urge you to be present and to listen carefully to what you hear. And I also want to single out Josette Sheeran as a good friend and a colleague and an innovator, but someone who, together with the African Union and its leadership, Chairman Ping and others, will in fact work together to take this platform forward. So I apologize for taking a moment or two from your panel, but thank you for giving me the opportunity. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Raj, and it is really an honor to be here. In fact, there are moments of time that, to me, mark the time when you know the world has shifted. And it was, in fact, last week in Addis Ababa at the African Union's new headquarters, when it is true there were 100 businesses that had to be turned away for this initiative and platform built from Grow Africa and the African Union and NEPAD, but brought into the new alliance, and we could not even accommodate all of the interest. And then today, hearing the President of the United States and the leaders of the G8 and the leaders of Africa stand together and say we need a new era of partnership. While in Addis, I thought, I remember some years ago, not too long ago, thinking it's really the end of the era of the handout. And we have to think of a hand up. How to ensure everything we do is helping people solve their own problems, how they end poverty and hunger, and build in lasting solutions. And when I said the words hand up, I was struck that even those felt dated. And I thought at that moment, we're really in the era of the handshake. And I want to thank you, Raj, for having that vision, that now was the moment in time to capture what Africa's really been calling for, which is the world to join in partnership, and that's what this panel is about. It's about partnerships built on mutuality of interest and mutuality of respect. It's the era of what one person said in Addis, the 4 Ps, not just public-private partnerships, but public-private partnerships for people. And I'm reminded as we gather of another era and another food crisis in 1974, when the world thought it would not have enough food and looked and thought, where can we develop out the capacity to feed the world? And at that time, Brazil really was a country that was in quite a food crisis. It was not one of the top 5 exporters of food in the world, and neither was it, as it is today, the country that by some estimates is beating hunger faster than any on earth. But that story, which included a partnership of research, but mainly private sector partnerships with Brazil, transformed the Cerrado and a country into being one of those that was helping not only feed itself, but the world. And so, as we gather today, we are in a post-surplus world. It's important to note that because by all estimates, the world will have to produce 50% more food by 2050, and it's why I say this is the moment for the African farmer. That the time has come for the African farmer and that the world cannot feed itself without the African farmer. And so hence, I think this alliance, which allows the world to work in partnership with African nations under the CAADP and NEPAD framework to say what is in Africa's interest, and not only how will Africa feed itself in the world, but transform the face of poverty and hunger in Africa at the same time. None of this can happen without visionary, bold leadership, and we saw a lot of that this morning. And it's individuals who are saying, let's look at each other differently, let's do business differently. But today, right now, in this panel, we have bold, visionary leaders, not only from Africa, but from the private sector. And I just want to show a slide which will list the 48 companies. And if you're on that list, could you raise your hand in the audience here? The 48 companies that just in the past 17 weeks alone and I remember, Raj, when we met in Davos with those companies and you laid down the challenge and you said the G8 really wants to put energy behind this and we're challenging you to make specific commitments. So just in the weeks since January, and gathered in Addis Ababa last week, these companies have pledged over $3 billion in new investments to help transform the face of hunger and poverty in Africa. So that's bold and visionary leadership, and it's willing to look at the world in a different way. I'm always struck by Einstein's quote that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And I, for one, am ready to try new models of doing this. I just want to poll the audience before we go to our panel on how many believe in this audience that within 30 years, Africa will not only be feeding itself by helping feed the world. 30 years. I'm going to now keep going backwards, and we're going to find out where our moment of time is that we have to push toward. How about in 20 years? I think we lost about half. We had the whole room in 30 years, so this is a short time when the world believes the transformation will happen. This is an exciting moment. How many believe in 10 years? We can basically see a reversal of the tide on this. I am raising my hand, not just demonstrating how to do it.
What is the question?
Okay, well, that's a big change of mindset, and we're going to really ask the panel here what needs to happen to make that a reality. This is the nuts and bolts panel. This is the roll up the sleeves, get down to business panel. And I think Africa has put out its sign that it's ready to do business in a way that is win-win, has mutuality of benefit, but now let's decide what needs to happen to make that real. To start, I'm going to open with, ask His Excellency Jean Ping, the chair of the African Union Commission, and the place that is the ground zero of all of this. Mr. Chairman, let us know what are the 3 things on your mind as you've heard all of this today and what you want the world to know.
Well, I think, first of all, as everybody said, Africa has become today the new frontier. 10 years ago, I think The Guardian mentioned that Africa is a lost continent. And 10 years later, the same Guardian said Africa is the new frontier. So we have moved, as you said, from a pessimistic time to now an optimistic time. But what I want to say is that we in the continent, we are ready for investment, waiting for you. We are ready. There is no need to continue to give you figures. They have been given this morning. We have been told, it is admitted that the three elements of development are investment, trade, and ODA. So ODA, by the time being, due to the crisis, in spite of everything which is said, we know that they are not going to increase. So we still have investment and trade. And as I told you, in Africa, we are ready. We want to give you a difference between bilateral and multilateral. Second thing. Bilateral is that you are working with three countries, three or four, the successful countries, Tanzania, Ethiopia, and Ghana. Okay. Ethiopia is 40 million of, Tanzania is 40 million inhabitants. We are bringing you 1 billion of inhabitants for investors. You can see the difference. Africa is a continent of 1 billion of inhabitants divided by 165 borders into 54 countries. But we are going to dismantle all of this to have only a single market. And it's going fast. Today, half of the continent has been already in a single market. I mean, 2017, that COMESA, SADC, and ECA, the population is about a little bit more than 500 million of inhabitants of this. And 26 countries, 58% of the GDP of the continent already. So you see, we are moving fast. And for an investor, it is good to see a so large market than the small markets. We are bringing you all of this. And we think that the rest of the continent should move, following the example of the four successful story, should move to the same level. And that's the role of African Union, is to bring everybody up and to be there. So we are ready for investment. Everything is there. If you think that there is something missing, tell us. We are not only talking in terms of markets, but in terms of governance also. You know what you are doing. When we see that the democracy has been challenged here and there, we are the only continent to interfere immediately and to stop. You have a coup d'etat in Honduras, you have it in Thailand, you have it in Fiji, you have it, nothing happened. But we in the continent, we bring democracy back. We fight corruption. This is for good governance.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just a fact here. So Africa is ready to do business. In fact, we saw last year, according to the World Bank, 78% of African nations made regulatory reforms that made it easier for small and medium enterprises within their own country to do business. And 13 economies come together to simplify business entry and exit. And so this type of work you're saying on integration is happening, and the types of improvements, I think 8 years ago, this was not really at the center of policymaking in Africa, and now it very much is. Anil Jain is the managing director and CEO of Jain Irrigation Systems. You do business all over the world, and you do business in Africa. Are you seeing the type of environment that's going to allow you to make the kinds of pledges you've made and commitments to Africa? But what would prevent you from scaling up even faster, and what do you want to see? What are the few things that are important for you to see?
I think it is important to see that, there is this general discussion about food security, food growth. Agriculture is very much a local issue. So you need to see local solution for the community, agriculture community in a given area. So if within the African countries and individual countries, if one can create an approach of what is called cluster development, where based on the climate, the region, soil, water, etc., and the farmer's propensity to look at it, if they can create for particular certain crops which can create maximum amount of value, a development model around that in terms of logistic, infrastructure, market linkage, then you will see sustained growth. When you started talking, you talked about 4 Ps, but I think the most important P you missed is profits. The farmers must make profit to create sustainable agriculture. 10, 20, 30 years, farmers would do it only if they are going to make profits. Otherwise, because farmers have been selling at lower prices, they have been kind of subsidizing the rest of the society. And that is how they have remained poor and the sector has remained poor. And that needs to change in terms of value creation. Now, when we look at the small farmers, we think even a small farmer of 1 hectare or even 1 acre, as small as that, he can create significant value for himself and for the people around him, his family, extended family, and can become a productive member of the society. As long as he can do agriculture with the best practices in terms of using the right amount of the resources, less amount of fertilizer, everything, all the inputs, water, and create more output. Its most critical part is with the same amount of land and less amount of resources, you should be able to create far more. And that is feasible today with the technology. Now, but the technology is not a magical wand. You need to do the transfer of knowledge and a lot of hand-holding. Now that, again, you have to do based on the local culture, local language, all of those issues. Now to create that competency in the hands of these small farmers, so that they are these private entrepreneurs who believe in themselves, you help them mitigate their risk, then you are creating a new ecosystem which is self-sustaining, and you start a virtuous cycle. Of course, finance is a missing link which we need to take care of also, and I'm sure Rabobank will speak about it. But if you are able to do this in this manner, at least our experience in India, where we have done a lot of work, that we have been able to work with almost more than 3 million farmers who used to make somewhere between, let's say, $100 to $300 per year per acre. These farmers today are making $800 to $1,000 per acre per year. Now that 3 to 5 times growth in their income within first 3 or 5 years of this effort is a significant change from what they've been doing for ages and generations together. So you can create a disproportionate value creation with the right localized last mile connectivity solution, taking into account the entire situation. The other question you asked, that commitments we are making, what do we need to see and whether we can go with the speed. We are hoping that we can go with the speed, but the local governments and their policies will play an important role in terms of infrastructures and market linkages. We can provide even the market linkages because we as a company also buy from farmers what they grow. And we also follow a model where we give a floor price to the farmers, and if market price is high, we try and give them closer to the market price and not just one contract price, because one contract price can result into big problems for the farmers as well. So when you can participate in the entire value chain with these farmers, you can grow rapidly, but it will depend also on the individual countries and their governments in terms of how do they create policy infrastructure and access to capital by the farmers.
Well, excellent. And I'm going to ask each of you if you had a magic wand and could change one thing to scale up the addressing of food and nutrition insecurity in Africa, what it would be. The one thing, if we come back. Michael Mack, CEO of Syngenta International, headquartered in Switzerland, a key member in the New Vision for Agriculture and the New Alliance. You're looking at, I think, expanding investment in Africa by $500 million. Excellent vision. Do you believe that this progress can be made through smallholder farmers? We're hearing about that. You have experience around the world. Tell us how you view that and where your investment's going to go.
Well, first of all, the smallholder farmer, particularly women smallholder farmers, are going to be the key to enable this African revolution. And it's a real privilege to be part of what I think you correctly called the nuts and bolts panel, because getting underway and focusing on these smallholder farmers in all of the countries across all of the crops is vitally important. This morning was a big milestone. I mean, for the first time, the G8 having tabled food security as being equal to peace and prosperity was a real arrival. And I think for those of us, and here I'm going to harken back, Josette, to that time period. I guess Bono talked about it this morning when some 5 years ago, you know, the headstone, the tombstone of the aid was beginning to be erected, and a number of people in this room had the dream of public-private partnerships that 5 years ago was a bit of a concept and a holdover from corporate social responsibility and quite a bit of altruism, but that has now given way to a vision. And here I'd like to give a lot of appreciation and thanks to the leadership of the World Economic Forum, which in its truest form have brought together government, non-government organizations, and businesses for an important dialogue. And that dialogue gave rise to, the first time, a shared agenda and objectives about how to actually begin to change the dilemma from how do we feed Africa to how can we imagine growing the productivity of this important continent. And of course, then after the president talked about the beginning, Raj Shah, I think very wisely and appropriately said, we've arrived here because we've spent some years getting to this point. And between the new vision for agriculture, we got underway with some important first steps. We did some piloting in a number of countries in Africa. We linked together the importance of people, and it's all going to come back to people, these smallholders, women, and we link that with the land, and you heard about it from Bono. This is important land. Those of you might not appreciate that actually Africa today has a larger agriculture economy than Brazil, 3 times larger, and it has 3 times the amount of land. And yet we talk about the Brazilian success story, but the African success story is right within our grasp, which is why I raised my hand that within 10 years, I think we can really shift this. We've got we've got pilots underway. We've got a legitimate and a brimming pipeline. And from the slide that you saw, a lot more people are coming to be part of this important public-private partnerships. So what we've done, we've shaped this a bit by changing subtly the objective. We've gone from talking about hunger to talking about agricultural productivity, but you get hunger solved, but so much more if we do it that way. We talk about innovation, and innovation isn't merely, I'm from the crop protection and seeds industry, but innovation is so much more. It's irrigation, it's finance. We heard about telecommunications this morning, insurance, creating markets, so that end to end we're able to pull together the strands that we need to make this a very big and productive industry. You ask about scaling, Josette. I mean, scaling is imagining how to take something as simple as innovation and eliminating, for example, hand weeding. And what can that do for agriculture? All of that is technology that exists today. So it's not about inventing to fix this. It's about gathering up what we have and getting these partnerships end to end to commit themselves to this. As I think about what has changed over these last 5 years, one of the things that strikes me is we have dared to be very ambitious. We've changed the ambition from solving an African problem as such to having the African mindset imagine how can we compete with the Brazilians for the trade that goes to China? How can we be major exporters? Now, of course, that isn't going to happen today, but it is entirely possible that if we have that ambition, that between now and 10 years from now, 12 years from now, that can happen. We need to do so by stringing together the number of initiatives, creating home markets in Africa, and making them regional powerhouses that can then begin to get on their journey. But it's about sharing knowledge and sharing tools and linking these people that are already there today. I think the other thing that is very different than it was 5 years ago today is that the mindset has to be that it's African-owned and African-led. And if we do that well with inspired leadership, and I think we've heard from some of that inspired leadership this morning, that smart investment is going to follow. You'll create the context for us to see this for the business opportunity that it is. So maybe I'll end by having an ask of everybody in this room. Come on in, the water's warm. This is a big opportunity for all of us, and it's now, and the opportunity is large.
All of this may sound overly optimistic, but let me just tell you one figure here. Tanzania has grown its horticulture industry from $1.4 million a year in 2004 to $340 million a year now. In that, Tanzania is rated number 3 in the African competitive rating that the World Economic Forum does. It is one of the most improved nations in creating an environment for these partnerships. Jacqueline, we're going to give you full credit for that transformation. How did it happen? But more importantly, what do you want to tell this audience? What do you need? What kind of partnerships do you need? And are you hearing what you need to hear today?
Yeah, thank you very much. What we need to appreciate is that we need to understand that what got us here is not necessarily what will get us there. So we have really to appreciate that we need to start doing things differently in the context of PPP, not in the public-private partnership context, but in the context of people, profit, and planet. I mean, and in this way, we should be able maybe to address the 3 critical questions as follows. One, how do we put food, not only food, but quality enough food on the tables today, while at the same time, how do we put money into our pockets today, especially into our smallholder farmers' pockets, while at the same time taking care of our environment and natural resources for today and future generation. So this is the stimulating, which is required to accelerate agriculture productivity, while at the same time raising global income and reducing hunger, requires kind of capital investment in agriculture productivity, while at the same time coming up with the right mechanisms and the right tools to bridge in a sustainable manner the existing gaps in agricultural productivity. The overall agriculture investment in developing country is now approaching about $90 billion annually. This is according to the Global Harvest Initiative report. This reflects the massive need for investment, but at the same time putting emphasis on the best, or coming up with the best way to kind of channel the required resources in agriculture productivity in developing countries. And the most feasible way of closing the gaps in agriculture productivity and agricultural investment, especially in the private sector and in developing countries, is through the involvement of the private sector in a more meaningful way, making sure that we have private sector, those from the local community, while at the same time attracting investment from the international investment. So what we need to appreciate is that global transformation or global agriculture transformation comes from the local expertise, and therefore we need to come up with the right environment, enabling environment that will prosper investment in our countries, making sure that investors who are already there are happy, investors who are already there are actually becoming the positive reference point for new investment to come to our countries. So what needs to happen now is really walking the talk. We need to reduce the number of meetings. We need really to act accordingly, because it is very clear. It is quite clear from the morning sessions that we do understand the issues, we do understand the challenges, and it is high time that we really preach water and drink water preach wine and drink wine instead of keeping on discussing these issues. The opportunities are there, the private sector, we are ready to invest, and we have already committed. So what needs to be done is to have the right environment for this good investment. Thank you.
Excellent. We'll put in the goals a goal for an 80% reduction in meetings. I like that. The Global Competitiveness Report ranked Tanzania number 5 in the world for women access to the labor force and labor opportunities. Number 5. Okay, well, none of this happens without money. And we know that in many ways, Africa has not gotten the proportionate share in investment. And in fact, in the competitiveness report, the number one concern of business leaders throughout Africa is investment, finance for the activities. So Barry's going to get Barry Martin, member of the executive board of Rabobank, based in the Netherlands, and they do agriculture and food financing and agribusiness, bank business throughout the world. So Barry, you're going to have to represent the entire finance industry and tell us, is there something wrong with the risk modeling in Africa? Is there something that investors are missing? Do we have to rethink that? And why is it that you have found a way to do business, Rabobank, in places where others fear to tread?
Well, thank you. I definitely think that to represent the whole finance sector is a little bit too much for us. I can represent the cooperative bank, Rabobank, and the things we do because we believe in it. And the first thing we believe in is that to be able to provide proper financing, you have to develop a proper banking structure in the country you want to do business in. And banking is not only transactional. It's not only having payment systems. A banking industry, they have a lot of other things which are essential. One of them is that you have to teach people to save. Because if you don't have a good savings industry in local currency, you cannot finance the SMEs, you actually cannot finance the smallholders. You cannot finance the whole value chain. Because as you know, or you may have heard, the value chain, also in agribusiness, it's as strong as the weakest link in that chain. So if the farmer, the smallholder farmer, has the best crop ever, but he cannot get financing, or a trader cannot get financing so that he can buy that and stock it, it's the weak link. So prices go down, and actually then you say farming is risky. But that's not true. The reason what we do at Rabobank is that we look at the whole chain, and I will come back to that. So if you have a good platform, if you have opened up branches in the regions where there are only farmers and there are no other banks, we do that. You have set up, you teach people how to do savings and what savings are. You show them there is a nice branch. You can believe in that bank because you walk in there, that's physical. It's not only, because many times people think their money, their savings are going to disappear. Then you can start giving loans actually, because then you really have a strong financial structure in the country. And as long as you don't have, you're only going to be dependent as a country always from the outside world, and that's not good. The last thing you have to do to have a proper financial structure is to give financial literacy to people. We have talked about it, but if you don't know how money works and how much you have to borrow, how can you borrow? How do you know that you need $1 million or you need actually only 1,000? I'm giving big numbers here, I know. How do you know how to deal with risks? How do you understand that if you borrow in dollars, you take also currency risk? All those things, and that's what we do. And that's, you ask what we do in nuts and bolts. Well, that's what we do as Rabobank. We're not doing it in Africa. We're already operating in 4 countries. We're going to start a 5th country very soon. And I will talk a lot about that also a little bit. So the real thing is, as long as we don't think that the whole chain has to be financed and the whole chain has to be complete, financing a farm is going to be risky. So we have learned that if you look at the whole chain, it's actually not risky to do financing of farms. We've done it now. I'm already 20 years in this business, and to be very honest, and I told that to you in Ethiopia, is that actually we don't really lose money with small. If you look at where we lost money, it's actually with the larger farmers. The larger projects is there where we lost money. with the small projects which are inserted in a really good supply chain, which is well financed, you don't lose money. Actually, these are the best supply chains you should be into because they have meaning and they have purpose. So, thank you. That's for a banker. Thank you.
Yeah. We made another piece of history today.
So, the fifth country we are starting right now is in Ghana. It's what we call the West Africa Agricultural Development Corporation. It's a finance company. It's not going to be a complete bank. And the reason why is that we concluded that to be more effective, we could actually finance the mid-sized processor, value-added companies. And why we are going to that mid-sized value-added companies is because they are the ones that typically will borrow 200,000 to 5 million. And that's very difficult to get access to credit in that level. Because these guys, they are the millers of rice. The guys that are going to, the people that are going to buy a processing mill, a rice mill, they are going to sell in the domestic market. They need local currency financing. Because they're not going to export their products, they're actually going to sell it in the local supermarket. And they will make sure that going behind that, we will have the smallholders into that value chain. And then we come, and we also hopefully help this smallholder to get organized, and also organize the smallholders in the sense that we can set up cooperatives, because that's what we are good at. You always have to do what you are very good at. And that's why in this VAT project, we partnered with IFC, because they actually are very good at giving also local currency loans with USAID and also with AGCO, which makes the equipment. Because if you want to be successful making rice, planting rice, or making sugar, you have to have the equipment. And AGCO had committed also to set up a model farm in Ghana so that people can learn how to use that equipment and to be successful and do the maintenance. And that's the partnership we are talking about here, because that's the only way. So I very much liked, thank you. Again, no.
Take it again, yes.
Oh yeah, I love this, you know. I will say it, I will Twitter. They are clowning bankers. The world is changed. Thank you. I would like to finish, these are nuts and bolts. We are doing, and we are reaching 4 million people. We are reaching more than 1 million farmers. But there are two things I have not heard here and which are worrying me. Because we have to be innovative here and we have to be challenging. The first thing, we talked a lot about risks, about financing, but the number one risk a farmer, even if you are big or small, is crop insurance. Crop insurance, we have not talked about crop insurance here. I'm not talking about weather derivatives or something like that. Very simple, actually if you look at the success of developed world agriculture, is that they have the crop insurance in US, in Brazil, in Europe, all over the place. So please, let's think about that in the partnership. We have insurance companies around here, but
Is that your one thing you'd like to see change?
Yes.
Okay.
But there's one more.
Okay.
Because that's financial, right?
Yes.
So now
Okay,
can go
okay.
to the dream, right? Because
Well, before you start, let me tell you the 3 questions I'm going to ask this panel, and I'd like to have almost a one-sentence answer from each of you as we go through. One is, what's the one thing you'd want to change? The second is, what's the most important thing this partnership brings to the table that hasn't been there before or should bring to the table? And third, what is your big, audacious idea that you think could really change this dynamic? The one that you have in your dreams about how the world transforms the face of food security and nutrition security.
I can answer that one later, right?
Okay, so now you have time to think about it, so you'll start with what's the one thing you'd like to see change?
I would like to see change that farming becomes attractive for young people.
Ooh. Africa will have 40% of the world's labor force in the coming decades. This is very important. Farming become attracted to young people. Can I ask, because Barry actually grew up in a farm in Brazil.
Yes.
His father's a Brazilian farmer. It's amazing how many people's personal histories are connected to this. How many of you come from families go back no more than 2 or 3 generations that have an agricultural background? Yeah. Beverly, Oda, and others there. How many of you have a family memory of hunger in the past 3 generations? We just point out that this has been a quest of humanity, not just of Africa, and it was not a generation or 2 ago that farmers in Sweden could not make enough to survive, that we saw malnutrition numbers in the US and elsewhere so high. And so all of this is something that is a quest of humanity and not something that is a specific, unique problem that only Africa has experienced in recent time. Mr. Chairman, one thing you'd like to see change? If you had one thing.
Well, I think, first of all, I would like to say that we should not orient all the investment as philanthropy. It can't be philanthropy. We could have philanthropy with Bill Gates and others, but it's business. So they have to come also to make business. Ask Chinese, ask Indian. They are in Africa. They are doing business. It's not for philanthropy. You know, why don't you come? You know, ask them. They're making profit. So you should come also to make some profit. The second thing which I would like to say is that I think that in the past, big investors are coming, ignoring the country, just doing business, sometimes without having some relations with the country. There are some local investors who would like to have a joint venture with also big investors for business, not for philanthropy, for business. But we saw sometimes some countries in Europe saying that this business should be given to their to that company. Don't give it to an African. How can you act like that? It's absolutely unacceptable. Come work with us, and it will be for the best for everybody. I think that I just wanted to say that. And if we change a little bit to work for the benefit of all, and also as a private firm to make business and to have money, it's fine.
Excellent. How about you?
One change within the context of agriculture is that the terms high-intensity, environmentally sustainable agriculture undertaken by smallholders does not necessarily pose dilemmas, that we can do all of those at the same time.
Excellent. Anil?
More focus on water use efficiency, because without water, no agriculture can exist. And so if you follow dictum of more crop per drop, President Kennedy had said that a person who will solve the problem of water, he should get 2 Nobels, one for science and one for peace. Africa needs both.
Thank you. And Jacqueline?
Improved business enabling environment, thereby having the right mix of policies and regulatory framework. I would wish to see African countries having more stable, consistent, clear and transparent policies and regulatory framework, and also reduced or improved good governance, as well as reduction in corruption.
Excellent. Okay, Barry, you get to kick off the next one. What's the most important thing that this alliance can bring to the table that hasn't really been full enough in the past?
Well, I think it's the first time we at Rabobank see that actually we can come and invite people to join our programs. And actually we have been inviting by others to join their programs, and we are talking to each other. It's incredible. We already for 10 years investing, and we were not talking. And so what it brought, we are here and we are talking. It's great.
Excellent. And how about you, Mr. Chairman? What can this alliance bring to the table that's been missing?
Well, very important, because if you move 20, 30 years ago, everything was governmental, you know, mainly in agriculture. And then the structural adjustment came, they say everything should be private. And now we are with private-public partnership. This is very good. Everything which is extreme is insignificant.
Excellent. Michael?
Public-private partnerships require dialogue. The conversation I was having not that long ago with an NGO associated with my own company, he pointed out that to have a dialogue, you have to have a shared objective. And I think we are having a dialogue. We do have a shared objective. We're putting some serious money in here, and we're talking seriously with leaders who can really make the difference. And it's altogether different than it has been ever.
Wow. Altogether different than it has been ever. Powerful statement. Anil?
I think what this alliance brings together is usually when you go into countries, start the business, because it's something new which is happening, you want to urge for certain changes. And on a bilateral basis, when a company seeks those changes from the government, it becomes difficult, it becomes colored, you know, there's so many issues goes with it. What this alliance brings to the table is that the policymakers, the private sector, can come together in interest of smallholders and demand certain things which they agree to, and if they deliver on, then private sector will be able to really go for and start executing. That's what they're supposed to be doing. And I hope that this alliance can focus in terms of action from tomorrow onwards to make that happen over the next few months so that action can happen.
Excellent. And let's also remember the civil society, which often have a best understanding at the village level and elsewhere of what's needed. Everyone with civil society, could you raise your hand here? But I think we have a lot of leaders, and very important to note that. Okay, jump in.
Okay, I think the alliances will bring collaboration, which includes not only exchange of information and sharing of resources, but also capacity building of other partners for mutual interest, and also the interfacing between the public and the private sector towards achieving the most common agenda: hunger reduction, improving food and nutrition security in our countries.
Excellent. Now, we only have a few minutes. I just want to ask the CEOs, if you had to give the elevator speech to your fellow CEOs to tell them to get on board with the alliance, you already made that pitch, but Anil or Barry, what would you say?
Let's share a dream. Let's have a young woman farmer driving her beautiful tractor owned by the cooperative with the best seed and best crop protection available, selling her produce to the mobile phone.
Wow.
Business card.
I'll join in that dream.
Again, bankers. I mean, they're doing well.
Anil?
I would say, you know, there is a limitless opportunity in terms of African continent, land, water, resources, everything. To go for it, you have to go for it for the right reasons. And if you go for it right reasons and have empathy for the farmers, what the outcome would be would, you know, justify your being there, your existence.
Excellent. Now, remember, there's a lot of exciting things happening. Africa had 6 of the fastest 10 growing economies in the world this past year, received its largest ever share of FDI last year. In fact, it got 25% of the share of the world's FDI last year. I think things are on the move, but let's talk about a big, audacious goal, the one beyond what we've been talking about, and or any other closing thoughts you may have, not to put you too much on the hot seat. But Mr. Chairman, what would be your audacious goal?
I would.
What would be your bold goal? What would you want people to, in this room, to think of beyond just business as usual?
That Africa is really beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you. Michael?
I think my audacious goal would be to, if we imagine the world, the entire world, as kind of occupying one farm, this farm is set to perhaps double in size if we don't do anything differently. And my goal would be to imagine that we can actually feed the world in a profitable, environmentally sustainable way with less land than we're already putting into production today. We've got the means to do it, and all we need to do now is get behind that. Employing more people, more profitably, on a farm that is smaller than the one we have today with fewer toxicological inputs.
Excellent. Anil?
My audacious goal will be not only that Africa feeds itself and becomes a productive member of the rest of the food system globally, but more importantly, while doing that, they become prosperous themselves, which has not happened for for centuries. And if that can be changed within this 10, 20, 30 years, then we would have achieved really a lot.
Thank you. And Jacqueline?
I'll say invest in women and listen to women and support women groups. And why am I saying that? Is because women are natural at building long-term, trust-based relationship. Women are good at nurturing relationship. And we are also consensus builders. And women are also well-networked, passionate persuaders. And this is all about leadership. And this is the partnership that we are talking about. So don't hesitate in identifying capable women, invest in them, and this is how we can achieve food security.
Very good. Very good.
And Barry, the banker, gets the last word.
Well, I already had my elevator pitch. But well, on the serious note, I think really the whole, what we're talking about, getting everything together, getting the inputs, getting the knowledge, getting the passion of everybody is what's really going to have to happen in the next. So if we go to the G8 right now, where we're standing right now, and we don't go passionate about it, and I think the nuts and bolts of everything is to be passionate about what we are going to do. It's going to be the success of having Africa exporting food, traceable food to Europe, to the developed world. And that's what we should be looking at.
Well, thank you. I would like the audience to join me in thanking all the business leaders who have come. For helping us in 17 weeks to transform the face of hope, because that's what it's done, and for injecting new energy, new purpose, and the roll up the sleeves, get down to business spirit that has infused not only Grow Africa, but the new alliance and the new vision and everything that we've done. Thank you, Dan Glickman and Chicago Council, and Catherine, and everyone for pulling us all together, and Marshall, thank you.